Thanks for tuning in to leftcoastnews.net, news and information from the wacky, sometimes communist, liberal West Coast of the United States. For more, visit leftcoastnews.net.
Governor Ferguson is touting his support for law enforcement by saying that the state needs to come up with $100 million to hire new officers. Sounds good on the surface to those of us who support law enforcement and public safety. The problem is, after seeing this memo that the King County Sheriff released saying she was working hard with local Democrat legislators to get the 1% cap on property tax lifted so they can increase their budget. So really this whole ploy by Ferguson to increase law enforcement and public safety is just a means to get people to support and legislators to vote for lifting the property tax cap. Of course, local governments are already getting around this by increasing the value of your property to ridiculous amounts so that the taxable value goes up. House Bill 1334 was introduced to raise the cap to 3%, but would also allow it to go up 5 to 6% based on CPI. House Bill 1334, introduced by Representative Pollitt, would increase the amount a municipality could raise property taxes by changing the way inflation is calculated and adding up to an additional 3% based on population. Under HB 1334, the inflation calculation would change from the implicit price deflator to the consumer price index. The implicit price deflator is calculated on the goods and services the U.S. produces. CPI is calculated using a selection of commonly purchased products by consumers over time and is the most widely used number for calculating inflation in the U.S. The CPI calculation typically results in a higher percentage, 2 to 2.4% per year, which would increase the maximum ceiling to which a municipality could increase taxes. The result would allow property taxes to be increased by a potential 5% to 6%, depending on the CPI increase in population, capped at 3% per year, but would allow a higher taxation rate overall in the subsequent years. Washington voters approved Initiative 747 in 2001, putting the cap on property tax at 1%. Over the years, Democrats have attempted to overturn that initiative with various bills, but they have all failed. Don't make the mistake of thinking this is just a tax against homeowners either. Renters will feel this pinch as well. Your rent will almost certainly go up when property taxes go up. This year, Ferguson has a legitimate argument. We are dangerously short on police officers. Crime is soaring. While I support law enforcement, I don't blindly support spending $100 million to add additional police. What good does it do to put more cops on the streets when you have courts full of liberal judges who just let criminals back on the streets? What good does it do to have more cops when Democrats are passing more and more laws to go lenient on criminals? Currently, the Democrats are running a number of bills that reduce sentencing, reduce enhancements, reduce criminal penalties. They are also trying to pass a law that would stop volunteers or reserve police officers from doing law enforcement duties or carrying a gun. They claim it's because reserve officers don't get enough training. Then give them more training. Like the fire service, many law enforcement agencies, small ones, rely on volunteer help to keep the community safe. This has been done for many years, but now, all of a sudden, it's a problem with Democrats. It's also a good way to have community engagement. This is a terrible idea from lawmakers. Something also needs to be done about these judges who refuse to enforce law. These lax laws need to be changed. This is a state where drug dealers do more time than murderers and rapists. There is something fundamentally wrong with that. I also do not support lifting the property tax cap to pay for it. We pay enough in taxes now. The state is pulling in record amounts of taxes, and yet we are in a deficit according to Democrats, 10 to 12 billion over the next 4 years according to Democrats. The biggest deficit in state history. Thanks, Inslee. Ferguson has said the state needs to tighten its budget. Looks for cuts. He's issued a hiring freeze. And even so, other state leaders, legislators, and judges are getting raises from the Washington State Standard. Washington's governor, attorney general, and state lawmakers are in line for hefty pay raises in the next 2 years. And salaries for the state's 7 other executives and hundreds of judges will climb as well, though not as fast as a result of decisions Wednesday by the Independent Citizen Commission that sets pay scales for the state's legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Legislators will get a 16% wage hike, and the governor and attorney general will receive a 14% raise under the new salaries approved at a meeting in Tumwater by the Washington Citizens Commission on Salaries for Elected Officials. Commissioners agreed every position should receive a cost of living adjustment of 3% on July 1st and 2% a year later. Then they tacked on extra for lawmakers and the two executive posts. Legislators who currently earn $61,997 annually would receive a total 9% increase in July, bringing their pay to $67,688 and 7% a year later, pushing their salary to $72,494. Leaders of the four caucuses will continue to earn more because they receive a stipend for added responsibilities. Gov. Bob Ferguson and Attorney General Nick Brown will get 7% raises in each of the next 2 fiscal years, a big jump from the 5% increase over 2 years that commissioners proposed in October. The changes approved Wednesday will push Ferguson's annual wage from $204,205 to $234,275, and Brown's from $193,169 to $221,614. Washington's 7 other executives, Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, State Auditor, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Insurance Commissioner, Treasurer, and Commissioner of Public Lands, would get cost of living adjustments only. Judges, including state Supreme Court justices, would receive boosts totaling 4% in July and 3% a year later. These same judges who have run our criminal justice system into the ground, who have created, in hand with Democrats, these crime-infested cities, they don't deserve a raise. Most deserve to be replaced. What a slap in the face to the citizens of this state. Elected officials and judges cannot alter what the commission approves, and the legislature and the governor must fund the pay changes in the budget. When the salary schedule is filed with the Secretary of State's office, there will be a 90-day period in which a referendum can be filed. If none is filed, the salaries will become law. Voters established the Salary Commission in 1987 to end the practice of politicians deciding their own pay. Though funded by the state, it operates independent of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. It's supposed to anyway. Its 17 unpaid members include residents randomly selected from the state's 10 congressional districts, plus representatives of business, organized labor, and higher education. Also represented are the legal and human resources professions. John Bridge, the commission chair, said they have to be mindful of the looming budget shortfall and how the public might react to what they perceive as too large of an increase. A successful referendum means the entire salary schedule goes out the window and no increases for members of the legislative, executive, and judicial branches for 2 years. No kidding. Doesn't sound like this commission was being all that mindful. I think most Washingtonians would agree that most of the goons in the Capitol and these absolutely worthless judges don't deserve a raise. Looking at this commission's agenda, you know it's a liberal honey trap when the first thing they do is a land acknowledgement, meaning they believe we are on stolen ground from the natives. So of course they would vote to pay all these liberal political hacks more money. So no money for cops, no one else in the state gets a raise. State hiring is frozen, but we'll go ahead and spend a bunch of money on raises for the people creating this mess, both politically and within the criminal justice system. We don't need any new taxes. We don't need to be going against the will of the voters and raising property taxes any more than what they already do. Democrats need to learn to live within a budget with what they have. Stop overspending. Stop paying for all these social programs that have made little or no difference whatsoever. You'd think they'd take a cue from what's happening nationally instead of doubling down on the reckless spending and waste of taxpayer money. Washington Democrats seem to think they can do whatever they want and spend whatever they want and completely disregard the will of voters. It's getting really old. At some point, the people are going to have to put a stop to it. Ferguson hasn't suddenly decided to support law enforcement. He sees this as an opportunity to exploit taxpayers for more of their hard-earned money.
Thanks for tuning in to leftcoastnews.net, news and information from the wacky, sometimes communist, liberal West Coast of the United States. For more, visit leftcoastnews.net. Thanks for listening to Left Coast News. For more, visit leftcoastnews.net. Please subscribe, like, and share to your social media. We appreciate your support. Thanks for listening to Left Coast News. For more, visit leftcoastnews.net. Please subscribe, like, and share to your social media. We appreciate your support.